Okay, we had the Venice Japanese American Memorial Marker Community Meeting on Saturday, September 11th, 2010, at the Venice Honganji Buddhist Temple, Vatican Centinela. It was a good day to commemorate the 9th anniversary of the bombing or the attacks on the World Trade Center, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and the Pentagon, because this is a big meeting about building something and not burning anything down. The effort to build a memorial on the northwest corner of Venice and Lincoln came to my attention when one of my students named Scott in my U.S. History class, part of the New Media Academy at Venice High School, brought in the Free Venice Beachhead on April 2009. It featured a front page photograph of Venice Boulevard just west of Lincoln, where a lot of Japanese Americans are lining up. And the caption reads, "On April the 25th, 1942, hundreds of Venetians of Japanese ancestry were forced to assemble at Venice and Lincoln Boulevards, where they were put in buses and taken to camps." He also showed me a Images of America book called Venice, California, published by the Venice Historical Society. In that book, there's a slightly different version of the same photograph, and their caption is a little bit more extensive. It reads, "On April 25th, 1942, they lined up at the corner of Venice and Lincoln Boulevards, and they were told to take only what they could carry. There was no violence. The Japanese Americans went through a processing station and were sent to internment camps. They were released when the war was over, but lost most of what they had owned. It was a black element in the history of the United States." In the April 2009 edition of the Free Venice Beachhead, it also published an article by Scott Yuta Jr. titled "When Our Japanese Neighbors Were Sent to Concentration Camps," and it talks about his family's experience with the evacuation and internment. When the article continued, inside the newspaper there's a little box called "Lest We Forget," and the box asked readers to email Councilmember Bill Rosendahl to support the idea of a memorial marker on the northwest corner of Venice and Lincoln to commemorate the Japanese American internment and evacuation, and to remind people that constitutional rights are so easily violated and lost. And if the students and the participants in a democracy don't know what their rights are, they will lose those democratic rights. Councilman Rosendahl was extremely responsive, and after Athena's very first email, he invited us to come to the City Council to make a presentation. He sent a chartered bus to pick us up from Venice High School and transported us on Friday, May the 29th, to the LA City Council, where one of our students, Felix, representing the entire class, read his letter to the City Council in support of the Japanese American Memorial Marker. We had a private audience with Rosendahl, got to see his office, and he also had somebody take us on a private tour of the City Hall. The students were very excited about having been invited. In June 2009, the Free Venice Beachhead actually published every single letter that the students had emailed to Rosendahl and CC'd to the Free Venice Beachhead. Then in July 2009, the Venice Beachhead published the names of students who additionally wrote letters, and in that article, it identified the genesis of this whole memorial campaign, because it started in the aftermath of the terrorist attacks on 9/11/2001 by the Venice Peace and Freedom Party. In 2003, the Venice Beachhead took up the cause in its April issue, and they say it very eloquently. "We at the Beachhead believe that a reminder of this sort will not only memorialize the Japanese Americans who were torn from their homes, but will serve as a warning to future generations that it can happen here." This is a simple map of the evacuation and internment. About 120,000 Japanese Americans were removed from areas in Washington, Oregon, and California, and moved to one of 10 what they called War Relocation Authority camps in the heart of the United States. But what's interesting is that an additional 120,000 Japanese Americans who were not living in Washington, Oregon, and California were living freely. In fact, some people from California moved to places like Utah or Colorado to escape the forced evacuation. They voluntarily evacuated themselves and lived freely, not in a camp, but like in a regular home or apartment in these communities, and worked, apparently without much discrimination. Civilian exclusion order number 7 identified, and there are exclusion orders of different numbers for different areas of Washington, Oregon, and California, but identified the areas that alien and non-alien persons of Japanese ancestry needed to report to. So this area is up to the Ventura line, Ventura Boulevard, all the way to Westchester, and identified 2422 Lincoln Boulevard as a civilian control station where a head of the family had to report for further instructions. The map of the prohibited area on the exclusion order shows the Malibu area, Santa Monica, part of West LA, and Venice. The exclusion order was signed by General DeWitt, who is famous for having said, "A Jap is a Jap, and it makes no difference whether citizen or not. I'm not worried about the Germans or Italians, but we will worry about the Japs until they're wiped off the face of the earth." The instructions to all persons of Japanese ancestry followed the exclusion orders, identifying what people could carry, and they could take only what they could carry: bedding and linens, toilet articles, clothing, tableware like knives, forks, spoons, plates, and bowls, and personal effects. And for a lot of the people, a lot of the younger people, one of the most heartbreaking things that they had to leave behind was their pet. Now, we're investigating exactly where the Japanese Americans were asked to line up. We do have a photograph showing them on Venice Boulevard, just west of Lincoln Boulevard. And then this photograph, it's a family photograph that was given to the Venice Japanese Community Center by the Tomita family. And these well-dressed Japanese Americans holding American flags. Under this sign that says Venice City Hall, it's like a pagoda-like roof, is captioned, "Waiting for the bus to Manzanar, 1941. We think that this was misdated because the attack on Pearl Harbor didn't happen until 1941, and the first exclusion orders didn't come until February 1942. So we think this is maybe 1942. But one of the mysteries of this photograph is that maybe it wasn't taken on the day that they went to Manzanar, because one of the people that was in this photograph has emailed me and said, no, it was a different day. But they're investigating what day, because what other day would they be so dressed up in waving American flags? Now, the fact that it was identified as Venice City Hall, we're trying to figure out where that was. At the time, this building, now known as Beyond Baroque at 681 Venice Boulevard, was variously known as Ocean Park City Hall, Town Hall, or Old Venice Town Hall. And we have a vintage photograph that identifies it as the City Hall, Venice, California. One of the people at my church remembers going to the police station. And the police station is now housing SPARC, the Social and Public Art Resource Center, at 685 Venice Boulevard. At the time, the LAPD Venice Division had the address of 595 Venice Boulevard. And if you look closely at the carved identification right above the doorway, it says Venice Police Station, Division 14. But again, we could find no documentation that people were ordered to report to the Venice Police Station or to the Venice City Hall at the time. Mark Salvatierra of the Venice Historical Society did a tremendous archival research, and he found the Santa Monica Evening Outlook documented the evacuation. And in the April 18, 1942 edition, they identified the Civil Control Station at 2422 Lincoln Boulevard, which we know from the exclusion order. He also found, on April 20th, 1942, that the newspaper identifies another civilian control station set up at 933.5 Venice Boulevard, Venice, near the corner of Lincoln and Venice. And on April the 27th, the Santa Monica Evening Outlook reported that the Japanese from Santa Monica were picked up at 12th Street and Olympic Boulevard and moved to the Civil Control Station at 933 Venice Boulevard. He also found the Venice Vanguard documented this evacuation. On April the 21st, they reported that a Civil Control Center for the Venice, Culver, and other Bay Area evacuees has been set up at 933.5 Venice Boulevard, Venice, near Lincoln and Venice Boulevards. On April the 23rd, they reported that the Civil Control Station would be located at 933.5 Venice Boulevard. The evacuation plan for next Sunday is to be in addition to the trips to Manzanar originally